By the summer, Europe will have decided on some of the most far-reaching and controversial privacy legislation in the world. The Data Protection Regulation aims to improve consumer control of their data, punish businesses who break the rules, and give citizens confidence in online and offline services that use their personal data. Critics, mostly from industry, say that the new regulation will destroy businesses' innovation through prescriptive rules and heavy burdens. Open Rights Group have invited some of the involved personalities to give their opinions about the data protection regulation.
I'm Anna Fielder. You are interviewing me in my role as a trustee board director of Privacy International. I also represent them on all the consumer and privacy rights related issues.
Nick Stringer, the Director of Regulatory Affairs of the Internet Advertising Bureau.
The Internet Advertising Bureau, IAB, is the UK industry body for digital interactive advertising. So we represent over 800 businesses, big and small, engaged in digital marketing.
But what is personal data? Is it information linked to your name or just information in relation to you, like web blogs?
Every single other rule in the regulation depends on how you define personal data.
The IAB believes that the broader scope of personal data is an example of where the draft proposals fail to take a risk-based approach and fail to strike the proportionate balance.
Yes.
So in the draft proposals, the scope of personal data extends to almost every piece of information collected and used in a digital environment, regardless of whether it is sensitive, whether it is personally identifiable, or whether it is just aggregated data to help improve or tailor content or services.
It is quite broad, which is good from our perspective, because it means that you are covered in lots of different circumstances. There's a lot of debate with people trying, with particularly certain industries, trying to narrow it down.
In addition to that, if you couple the proposed scope of personal data with the need to have a blanket explicit consent approach, it will effectively reduce the incentive for businesses to build in privacy and security measures and to reduce the risk of identification.
For example, there are people saying that pseudonymous data should be defined and excluded from the regulation. Anonymous data should be defined and excluded from the regulation. Well, of course, anonymous data by definition is excluded, but nowadays it's very easy to re-identify information previously considered anonymous.
What we propose, what the IAB is proposing, is a slightly different approach. We are advocating a new subset of personal data known as pseudonymous data. And by this, I mean when information is collected, altered, or otherwise processed that in itself cannot be attributed to an individual without the use of additional data. And I'll give you an example. Much of the information collected and used in advertising, in online advertising, would fall into this category.
Member of European Parliament from the Greens, Philipp Albrecht.
I'm the one who has to bring together all the different views into the changes to the Commission proposal.
The Executive Director of Center of Digital Democracy in the United States, Jeffrey Chester.
Well, the European privacy debate is of critical importance to everyone around the world. But I also have a selfish reason, because the strongest possible EU law will put pressure on the United States to finally address its terrible record protecting privacy of American citizens.
The member of European Parliament of the People's Party group, Axel Voss.
For my political group, the EPP group, the shadow rapporteur in the leading committee, in the so-called LIBE committee, and therefore I'm the one of these 7 persons who are dealing mainly in this issue.
Consent is a critical debate. How do you know someone has agreed to the data being used? Can you guess or assume someone has agreed? This is sometimes called implied consent, which consumers groups strongly object to.
Consent is what gives people control in certain circumstances. Again, there's a lot of arguments and attempts to weaken consent, for example, by eliminating the word explicit from the legislation. The reason why it's important that consent is very strong is because it is only one of many ways of processing your personal information.
I think the most important changes to the existing law is that we think about privacy by design and privacy by default. That means very easy that if you build a new app for your smartphone, for example, where you process personal data, then you have to think data protection and privacy directly already in the design of that application. So you have to assure that only those information which are necessary are really involved in the processing. And also with privacy by default, that if I install this app or if I visit a website, then it's me to decide if I want to give more information to the outside about me or not.
The U.S. privacy and consumer advocates have made it very clear to members of Parliament and members of the Commission, we support the Albrecht draft. We want to see the strongest possible regulation passed. And frankly, although the industry thinks it's a radical proposal, it merely restores to the power of the individual the right to decide who shall collect data about them and how it can be used.
Privacy advocates generally believe and think that it is fine to advertise and, targeting and profiling. It's okay if the consumers and citizens that are being targeted and profiled want to be targeted and profiled. Therefore, it needs to be a positive, affirmative action.
So consent plays an important role in the whole issue, but we can't have these only concentrating on consent, so we have to have some kinds of exemptions where you can process data without the consent, but then again we have to have these safeguards on the other side.
IB research shows that consumers in the UK actually understand the need for an ad-funded internet, but also want transparency and control, something that you mentioned in your question. And this underpins the self-regulatory approach that we've taken right across Europe for targeted advertising. And right at the heart of that is a small symbol or an icon in ads, which offers consumers greater transparency and control. And this approach is actually supported by a lot of national governments across Europe, such as the UK government, as well as the European Commission itself. So just to finish, we believe empowering consumer control is the right way forward, not wrapping them up in some sort of click hell that actually interrupts their experience and does not actually inform them to the better.